Okay, this is the mini lecture for Module 5.2. Please follow along on the Need to Know pages and take notes. This is the nitty-gritty of morphology. We're looking at the shape of words. Remember, please, that morph means shape. So if we take a word like unlimited, we analyze that shape, that word, unlimited, as consisting of the three building blocks un, limit, and ud. Disagreed consists of the three building blocks dis, agree, and ud. I know disagree doesn't have three E's, so never mind the spelling. The spelling really has no importance in this context. Kindness consists of the two components kind and ness, and books can be split up into book and the plural s. So the smallest unit or building block of a word that still carries some meaning and still has an individual constituent of its own is called a morpheme. So everything that you see here, the un, the limit, the ud, the dis, the ud, the ness, the book, the s, all of these are morphemes. Please note that we're not counting syllables. We're counting the building blocks that made up longer, bigger words. So in unlimited, the three morphemes are un, limit, ud. They happen to coincide with the three syllables of the word. But please look at the word books. It's just one syllable, but two morphemes, book and the plural s. So a morpheme is something that you find floating around in the language elsewhere. So book could stand by itself, and the S of books could be a part of other words. So we recognize that plural S as a typical building block for English words. This is almost too easy for me to even ask you to do, but please look at these 9 words and decide whether they consist of 1 or 2 morphemes. Cat, just one morpheme, doesn't break down any further. Cats is cat plus the S. Loving was made up by combining the word love with the ending ing. So again, never mind the spelling. I know that love really has an E at the end, but never mind the spelling. Mild is just one morpheme. Rejoin, 2 morphemes. Greed, 1 morpheme. Greedy, 2 morphemes. Teacher, 2. Teach and House, just 1 morpheme. It doesn't break down any further. In this context, you need to learn about discreteness. Discreteness in human language does not mean that you keep somebody's secret, like they used to say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. It doesn't mean that. Discreteness means that language can be broken down into very small, discrete building blocks, and that we can take those discrete building blocks and build something new. No other animal communication system in the world can do that. No matter how long a whale song is, it does not break down, as far as we know, into discrete units that the whale can then take out of there and recombine elsewhere and make new words out of. So this is really important. So think of the re in rejoin. You can break from the word rejoin, you can break off the re and put it elsewhere. So it's a discrete building block. It gives human language a lot of mileage. Okay. Here are different types of morphemes that you need to know about. There are free morphemes. They're sometimes also called stems or roots or bases. Just free morphemes works well. Free morphemes are words that do not need any attachments. They're completely fine by themselves. They can float around the way they are all over the language. And they do not break down any further. So book, table, hope, free, play, new, right. Doesn't break down any further into morphemes and is perfectly fine by itself. On the other hand, there are bound morphemes. They are also called affixes. The preferred term is affixes. So, for example, the plural S has to be attached to another word. You cannot have the S floating around in the language by itself. So the S needs to be bound or attached or affixed to other words. So here you have a bunch of affixes in English. The past tense ed, then in freedom, the dumb, the newest, the s, the re in rewrite. English has 2 types of affixes, suffixes mostly, and a few prefixes. The world's languages have 2 more kinds of affixes, and I'll show them to you now. Okay, so affixes are the bound morphemes, and the ones we already looked at are, for English, you have prefixes and suffixes in English. I'm pretty sure you guys already know these terms. A suffix is an affix, an attachment, that goes at the end of a word, and a prefix, like the one in rewrite, is an affix that goes at the beginning of words. So that's all we have in English, prefixes and suffixes. Other languages also have circumfixes and infixes. English doesn't. So I'm going to show you a circumfix now. German has circumfixes. In fact, to do the past tense in German, you need a circumfix. To do the past tense, where in English you would use the suffix ed, in German you need the circumfix ge and then a t, and the verb is in between. So please look at this example. To learn in German is lernen. That's the infinitive, but the real root stem or base is lern. So then learned is gelernt. And you see how the circumfix has surrounded the original verb on both sides. So circumfix is not a prefix and a suffix because they don't show up on their own. They are a package deal. You need them both at all times. I'd like you to figure out how you would say played in German. So to play is spielen. You need the root, and then you need to do affixation, and you get gespielt. Okay, now my all-time favorite, infixes. Tagalog, one of the many languages of the Philippines, actually the Philippines have 182 languages. Tagalog has infixes. This stuff is brilliant. So look at the example. To write in Tagalog is sulat. Writer is sumulat. So English uses the suffix where Tagalog uses an infix. So in English you can use the suffix to always say person who does that, write, writer, drive, driver, read, reader, and so on, learn, learner. And in Tagalog you use an infix. Now here's something interesting about infixes. They cannot just go anywhere into the original free morpheme. All the languages that have infixes have rules as to where exactly that infix goes. It either goes after the first syllable or after the first consonant or after the first vowel or before the first vowel, whatever the rule is. Languages have rules as to where exactly into the original word the infix can go. So this is really, really brilliant. I want to tell you that I gave this lecture many years ago in class, and I said English doesn't have infixes. And then somebody in class who was a real funny guy said that you can infix the F word into just whatever you want. And I'm not going to use the F word, but I'm sure you guys can supply it silently anyway. For example, you could say unbelievable or absolutely, and you can put the F word into that. This is a very special feature of your multi-talented F word. It's not a regular function of the language. In Tagalog, this is as normal as the in writer. I just thought it's very funny to think about that. Okay, so there's 182 languages in the Philippines, and I want you to know a little bit more about that. There is a great internet site called the Ethnologue, Languages of the World, and I have a link for you in the side menu on Etudes. And you can click around on the world map, or you can do a search by a language name, and you can get the most up-to-date information in terms of statistics and other information about each of the 7,000 or so languages that we have knowledge of. So Ethnologue tells us that there's about 21 million speakers in the Philippines who speak Tagalog, and population total all countries is over 24 million speakers. So that language is sitting pretty in terms of not being endangered. I want to introduce you to something that will come across much more often. Please look at that graph that you see on the upper hand left side. I never know if it's the left or the right for you guys. And you see that purple dot. This is what Ethnologue calls the language cloud. It is a graph, and every single dot in this graph represents a human language. The further to the left and up a language has its dot, the more viable the language is. The further it moves down on the graph and towards the right, the more endangered it is. So Mandarin and Spanish and English, the three biggest languages in the world, they would have their dots all the way in the upmost corner of the left-hand side on top here. The worse a shape a language is in, the more it moves down as a dot. So Tagalog is sitting very, very well here. There is a very involved and very useful way of assessing the health or the vitality of a language, and it's called the EGIDS score. A very famous American linguist, Joshua Fishman, started work on that. And it basically has to do with intergenerational disruption. Intergenerational disruption means that children do not learn the language and the culture and all kinds of other knowledge from their parents and grandparents anymore. So that's the disruption. Okay, moving on. So you guys have infixes now. There's different types of languages in the world with regards to what kind of morphology languages like. So some languages love to have a lot of affixes. Other languages do not like affixes at all. So you have these two extremes, and all other languages are somewhere on that scale, either more towards having lots of affixes or having few affixes. The languages that just love their affixes are called agglutinating. Some people call them agglutinative, it doesn't matter. A subform of them is called synthetic, but it's a little bit complicated. Let's stick with the agglutinating ones. Agglutinating languages love to stick on affixes. They take their free morpheme and then they put on a prefix, a suffix, an infix, a circumfix, a few more prefixes, a bunch more suffixes, and then they wind up with those humongously long words. A few Native American languages are like that: Navajo, Mohawk, Cree, Quechua. Languages from Africa do that. For example, Swahili, really well-known language from Africa. Turkish does that, Finnish, Hungarian, Celtic. On the other end of the extreme are analytic or isolating languages. I'm going to stick with the term analytic. Analytic languages do not like to have affixes. Vietnamese, the Chinese languages, Thai, Khmer are languages that do not see the point of putting prefixes on. It is very typical for Chinese speakers, for example, when they learn English, to have troubles with those affixes that English uses. For example, the plural S pretty much makes no sense to Chinese speakers. In Chinese, you would say, I had 3 cups of tea. And you would say 3 cup tea. The idea being 3 gives you how many? Cup is the measuring unit, and then what you had was tea. So there you go. So if you say 3 cups of tea, you haven't really added any real information. And to Chinese speakers, it's weird. Where did this S come from? And why do I have to stick this at the end of some perfectly good noun? I already expressed that I had three teas. Okay, so those are languages that have very few, if any, affixes. To give you some examples, oh yeah, I wanted to tell you, this is subject to change. Everything about language is subject to change in the course of time, and a language that is highly agglutinating right now, within the next 500 years, could stop agglutinating. Oh, by the way, think of agglutinating as gluing on suffixes and prefixes and so on, and making really long words. So this can change. A language can be analytic, and you look 500 years later, and it's agglutinating. I want to tell you how people who study morphology go about this, and they do this now with the aid of computers. They count the average number of morphemes within a word. Vietnamese is an extremely analytic language, and on average, Vietnamese has only 1.06 morphemes per word. That means hardly ever any ending. Pretty much everything is free morphemes. A language that is very agglutinating right now is Inuktitut. Inuktitut is spoken around the Arctic Circle. I'll tell you more about it. It's very interesting. And Inuktitut averages about 4 morphemes per word. That's a lot. English is mildly analytic. English has a little bit less than 2 morphemes per word on average. You guys don't need to know these statistics. Okay, so I want to give you an example of what an agglutinative language would be like. So Inuktitut is spoken in very varying dialects around the Arctic Circle, and I have an image here. I find it very interesting to look at the world in a different way than we typically look. So Inuktitut is a big language in Greenland, but all around the Arctic Circle, dialects or languages very much related to Inuktitut are spoken. I found a YouTube site where somebody is teaching you to speak Inuktitut, and I decided to pick this one screenshot. So are you from around here is Ma'ani miutsaja yuviit. One word, that's very agglutinative. One word renders are you from around here. By the way, underneath is the script that Inuktitut uses for its own language. Yeah, good luck learning that. Okay, another language I want to introduce you to is Welsh. Welsh is, of course, spoken in Wales. And I'm giving you here a European map, and I'm pointing at the United Kingdom and at Ireland. And then a close-up of that map, you see part of the United Kingdom is Northern Ireland, Scotland, England. Some islands are the Channel Islands, Isle of Man, and then Wales. but of course the Republic of Ireland is separate. Okay, so Welsh is a Celtic language that is still spoken in Wales, and I want to show you a little bit more about this. So if you look this up on Ethnologue, you see the number of speakers, you see where it's spoken, you see the dialects. There's a Northern Welsh, a Southern Welsh, and then there's a Patagonian Welsh. Patagonia is Argentina, so I would guess that this is a bunch of Welsh immigrants. It's a Celtic language. It is one of the official languages. It's used in schools. It uses the Latin script. We'll learn more about the typology later. I'm reading at the bottom of the text here now. Welsh is VSO. That means Welsh likes to start its sentences with verbs, then subjects, then objects. English starts with the subject. English would say Mary ate the pizza, and Welsh would say ate Mary the pizza. Okay, so languages differ with respect to that. This information comes from Ethnologue again. A symbol that is very typical for Welsh is this red dragon. I'm showing you the Egypt point in the language cloud for Welsh. The color of the dot in the language cloud also has importance. So an official language has a different color than an unofficial language, and so on. Kind of hanging in there, but it's not doing all that well. Okay, this is a place name in Wales. Get a load of that. That is the name of a little village. And if you're in the neighboring village and you want to find directions, here's the street sign that points you towards that village. And because it's too long for to be a regular street sign, they plaster that thing on the side of houses. So thankfully they translate that for the non-Welsh speakers. And it means St. Mary's Church in the hollow of the White Hazel near to the rapid whirlpool of somebody's name of the Red Cave. That is an agglutinating language, all right. If you arrive at the train station in this place, I find this very, very funny. So this is what you see at the train station. So you have arrived. And if you don't speak Welsh, I don't think you stand a chance at saying that. And then they give you underneath a pronunciation aid. I don't know about you guys, but this does not help me. I found something that I want you to listen to, and it's a young native speaker giving us the name of her village. So here's how this is pronounced. Very cute. Okay, here is an example of a language that can be very agglutinating as well. It's a language from Mexico. And there is a place name, and I'm going to try, but I'm not good at this. And the place name is Parangaricutirimícuaro. Oh yeah, the Spanish speakers are laughing now or cringing. And when I looked this up, it told us that this is a place in Mexico with a name that is a tongue twister, yeah, I'll say. And it has another name, Nuevo San Juan Parangaricutiro. Okay, it's in the state of Michoacan. It's a municipality with about 15,000 inhabitants, and is also known under the name of, I'm not going to subject you to that anymore. So I have a map here of Michoacan, and so this is a town in that area. Of course, in Mexico, people speak Spanish, but there are many, many, many Native American languages there as well. And the one that gave us this fantastic place name is called Purepecha, although there are alternate names. Tarasco is one of them. So Purepecha is a language of Mexico, and again, I have this information from Ethnologue. And they figure about 55,000 speakers, which is not bad, but of course not all that great. Please look at the dot for Purepecha in the language cloud. So 55,000 speakers, and still it is among the stronger languages, which gives you an idea about how terribly endangered the majority of languages in the world are today. So because obviously the language is not spoken in a vacuum, I wanted to look up a little bit more about that. And I'll tell you why the original place name now has Nuevo San Juan attached to it. The place had to be moved. They had to be resettled because of a volcanic eruption. I thought this is interesting. Look at these images that I found. So there's this fantastic looking volcano, and it's the Paricutin volcano. And in 1943, it erupted. It was a very famous volcanic eruption, very well studied, and researchers learned a lot about that. It was not a catastrophic blow-up. It was relatively slow. So the volcano started smoking. and that was a pretty good signal to the people in the village that they maybe should move. And so lives were not lost, although the village was completely destroyed. Can you see them next to the picture of the original village? Do you see the village's church? So the lava flow came and just buried everything here, and you see what's left of that church. And on the bottom here, I'm showing you the Nuevo San Juan, and they rebuilt their church. Okay, I want you to have some information about the Maori language. That's the native language of New Zealand. New Zealand now is predominantly English speaking, but the native language is Maori. It has 60,000 speakers, and get this is kind of interesting. 100,000 understand it, but do not speak it. That's bad, because that means that the language has become passive in so many people, so that's alarming. It is very, very similar to Hawaiian and Samoan, their sister languages, and there's 71 similarity with Hawaiian words. So in a way, Maori speakers and Hawaiians could understand one another pretty well, much like Spanish and Italian have a high level of lexical similarity, their sister languages. So for language use, Ethnologue had to say that it's mainly adult speakers, and that's super alarming, because that pretty much tells you the language is on its way out if children opt out of it. The government is trying to stop that trend, and they have 322 Maori language schools. You see the little dot of Maori, the Egypt's dot, where they measure how severe the disruption between generations is. I have a friend from New Zealand, and my friend insisted that I put the New Zealand rugby team's image in here. They're the All Blacks, and apparently they're terrific. So there. Oh, before each match, they do a Maori war dance to intimidate the other team. I think that's working pretty well. Here's a map. I want you to locate and be able to locate New Zealand. So you guys see Australia, and to the north of it, Papua New Guinea with its gazillion languages, 800. And to the east, to the southeast of Australia, across the Tasman Sea, you see New Zealand. So Maori is spoken in New Zealand. And then I have a close-up of New Zealand. The capital is Wellington, and on the southern island, Christchurch is a big language. Okay, so New Zealand boasts the longest place name in the world. It's a very agglutinating language. Here's the name of the place. It's out there in the boonies, and there's no way I'm even going to try and pronounce this. But look at this. That's pretty long. A student who took this linguistics class a while ago, Wyatt Hatfield, and his wife, they traveled to New Zealand a few months ago, and he's an avid photographer, and he went to this place on purpose. Although it's really in the boonies, he told me I had to drive all over the place to even find it. And it boasts to be the longest place name in the world. And there it is. And you see Wyatt on the right. And that's Wyatt's wife on the left. And Wyatt works for this photo shop in Stockton, Claskins. Okay, moving on. All right, here comes a little bit more nitty-gritty. This stuff here now is a little bit not so interesting, but at least it's easy. Okay, going back to affixes, of which English only has prefixes and suffixes. Now there's a difference in the way the brain functions when it comes to affixes. So the brain draws a distinction, and we have to draw a distinction. Some affixes we call inflectional, and others we call derivational. This is a little bit of a pain in the neck, but just bear along with it. Inflectional affixes are required by the language's grammar. The speaker has no choice. It's a grammatical ending. You just gotta use it. In English, it's not optional whether you use the plural s. For all but a few irregular nouns, you need the plural s if you want to do a plural. It's not optional. You cannot just say it or not say it. You cannot say, oh, I'm going to go to the bookstore and buy 2 books. No, that's just plain wrong. You got to say 2 books. So please hang on to the plural s and the past tense ed as good examples of inflectional affixes. Broca's is in charge of those. If people have damage in Broca's area, they will leave off these grammatical affixes. That's one of the first things to go. I once saw something very, very interesting, and there was this doctor who had to very, very quickly diagnose people who had aphasia. And he walked up to this one person and he said, "Please repeat after me. No ifs, ands, or buts." All of these little words are typically wiped out in Broca's, and the person with Broca's couldn't say that, and definitely didn't have the S endings at the end. I'll come back to that later. Okay, now come the derivational ones. They're easier. Derivational affixes. The affix derives, that's where the word comes from, or creates a new word. The speaker has a choice. You either use it or not. You can use the prefix "un" or not. It's up to you. You could say, "Oh, that was so not friendly." Or you could say, "Man, that was unfriendly." Or you could say, "We thanked him for being so kind," or "We thanked him for his kindness." It's up to you whether you use it or not. We have reason to believe that Wernicke's area deals with that, and these have real meaning. So the "un" changes the meaning completely. Friendly, unfriendly. I want to tell you that this is how we generate language. It is not likely that the brain lists all the words that could take "un." The brain knows I can stick the prefix "un" on a whole bunch of words and generate language. Okay, second to last slide. You almost made it. So please identify all morphemes. So of these 4 words, tell me which one is the free morpheme, and which one is a prefix and a suffix, and then tell me if the suffix is inflectional or derivational. English only has inflectional and derivational suffixes. There are no inflectional prefixes. Okay, I'm starting to not make sense anymore. Pause the video for a moment and just split up these words, identify their morphemes. Okay, so studied consists of the free morpheme study and then the suffix "ud." So "ud" is a suffix, and the language requires this when you do a past tense, so it's an inflectional suffix. Speakers consists of 3 morphemes: speak, and s. Speak is free. The is derivational, meaning it makes a new word. You go from speak, which is an action, to speaker, who is a person who does that. And then the plural s is just required if you have a plural. So the plural s is an inflectional suffix. Agreement, agree is the free morpheme. Meant is a derivational suffix. You either use it or not. You could say we all agreed or we were all in agreement. Textbooks consists of 2 free morphemes and an inflectional suffix. And that's it for this little mini lecture.